Sanje Cheta Tsuche Chana La Chanchu Padu Tani Jas Dagui Chijin Jive Sonan Ye Andra La Benje Sanje Druva Shu Sanje Cheta Tsuche Chana Adana Chetu Je Abayu Chetu Je Abayu Je Andra La Benje Chanjo Amjagadu Daguchi Dendo Kanki Denjin Jawachon Gaba Meba, Jimeba, Sheba Meba, Dameba, Oma Meba, Jome. Tada Timi Tijimi, Jawani Shidenba, Zoya Sanja Mananje, Tambate La Cha Cha Lo. Oh, yeah, that Karishuri. Oh, yeah, Lubin, Pabale, and you Karison Resena, Kanshi Tona, Koi, Paro Chimpi, Sabin Dream. Chanju Beji, Chanju Beji, Sabin Short, Yishin Nubu Lalabi, Yan Labi, Sushi did Demiche, Chinese Song, Nashin Chani. Akasore, Kanshitana Koi, Parochimbi Tamitoro. Then Kanshitona, Koi Jazi Paro to Jumba Chebaki, Ani, or Sabin and Java, Toba. Chanju Beji Sabin Shaw said, then tell a dana, and Lana quite as a part of the driver chapping, young was he to a pasha than Jia Bombi, and it Chanju Lana Bayanda, but Jumba Chapping, Sabin, then be, and it dante is that Kanshitona top koi, Paro Chimpi, Sabin to Chanju Baji, Sabin Shaw, tender with dandy, and it is in the Bujara and Labares. Ishi Nubu La Dene City, Ani Castle, Negatown, Negaji didn't do Mato, Ani the Tatukita to Minipa in town, Ishi Nubu Labares. Tender with Dandy, Tomni Gala, Dandy, and it you loaded on the bar, Teni Casa, Namja de Dambas, Siena, Dandy, and it Dewimabatis, and it's him, it is energy. You were sushi and it's Chebatic Mare, do the Dambashi Choku, Choku, send it out to Swade. How was I did? Oh, yeah. Kanshi Tomna Koi, Parochibita Sabin, then Kanshi Tomna Koi, Jazu Paro to Chimba Shebaki, Sabin and Dravaki Dandy, Kanshi Tona Koi, Kanshi Tona Koi, Parochib Sabin James, and Diladana. Kanshitona Koi. Then Kanshitona Koi.
So there's a verse then that's taught by the master Arya Deva, and it says that this base upon which one gets
Junjukinala me Trula Dan says, oh, Tetan Chibot Leon. Kanshi Tomna, Dan Kanshitana, Koa Jazi Paro to Chimbar Shebi Dan. Sigara.
So the verse begins by saying this basis by which one is able to pass beyond the ocean of cross over the ocean of suffering. The basis here is referring to the sort of state of life, the person, the state of the person that is able to pass over the ocean of samsaric existence.
Chanju Beji Sabin Cho, Laname Bayanda, but Zoe Chanju Tobara Cheba, Jebara Chebaki, Sabinan, Drabegi, Ani Lam, Yamsulena, Ani Lamba Chenuba, Dantila.
So this functions, this kind of basis functions as the seed for obtaining the splendor of awakening. That is a base or being born into a life in which that this kind of life functions as the seed for being able to obtain the splendor of awakening.
오 텐드라베 땡데 아니 예시지 누부 자자블라 예발에 라바레스 예시지 누부라 땡네 아니 체디 편조 주베데 마루 아니 땡지데와 주민여바 인장 인장 땡딜라 땡네 다 가서 코안자주 파루 집에 라센지 되니 탈침바지 쳇뉴바 인장 다 땡데 토바디 주로레다 담바 시이나 땡데 토바데 저위메 바지 체지그 말에 저우데 담바지 저고레 센송바 말에
So this kind of basis, this life is functions as the seed for obtaining the splendor of awakening. And so this kind of, and then the end of the verse says that this is more valuable than numberless wish-granting jewels. These wish-granting jewels, even if you had a mountain of these wish-granting jewels, all that would be able to do is to produce temporary happiness. But this kind of basis or life is such that one is able to obtain the splendor of enlightenment, and therefore it's more valuable than this mountain of wish-granting jewels. And the verse concludes then by saying that if someone is intelligent, they don't waste this kind of opportunity. They don't they don't waste this sort of opportunity, this sort of life, but they use it appropriately to be able to obtain their goal.
대인자다 가서래 코안자주 파로도 치마 제박이다 가서래 단다 가서래 나는 제상현지 되니 타중 코안자주 파로도 이제 라현지 되니 타침바 제발라 다또 가상 가능한도 주와 나신 전에 당신 말이 봐 방과 인간장 다시 저와 뒤지셈 편이 따라 주와인 가사 풍부 되는데 텔라섬전 제제도 아니 기타 양라 초남라 때내 신다 줘봤다를 쓰니다 돌아서만 나신 세례가라 당신데 아니 뒤지셈 제 스타치 저와 뒤지셈 세례가라 랑신 탐제 풍을 쳐봐기 아니 조데 당신의 스타치 저와 뒤지셈 세례가래.
So this opportunity then is something that within which we can accomplish both our own aims and the aims of others. So it's that precious. And then there's another verse which says that which explains the way to eliminate grasping falsely grasping at the eye and all of the suffering that arises from that. Which it's in that verse. This is from a sutra. It says that the self is a demonic mind. It's a demonic mind in the sense that it ruins and everything for both ourselves and for other persons. So once one recognizes this notion of self as functioning like a sort of demonic attitude, then one should wish to eliminate it.
그래서 다시 저와 뒤졌음.去年到了교화인 세가나 안내랑 당선 그 샤완도 주와. 랑그 섬샤 당선 그 샤완도 주. 랑그 당선 그 샤완도 주니 아니 가서라 차단 모습 깨니. 아니 차단 모습 이제 왕게 레사네. 아니 코알코데 아니 동안나서 받지 용고고와 인장. 아니 去年到了교화인 스팀바레.
去年
到了교화인. 당신 그 샤완도 주와 시작거래. 去年到了교화인서.
去年到了。
당신 그 샤완도 주와를 시작거.
So therefore, once one recognizes this, this clinging to the self in the false, erroneous way as being this sort of demonic mind, one has to recognize that is harming oneself, and it's harming oneself and others, such that when one is under the control, is dominated by this grasping at the self, then one gets angry at other people, one harms other people, and being under the control of attachment and aversion that arise from this grasping at the self, then one engages in all kinds of actions, karma, that cause suffering for ourselves and for other beings. So once one recognizes that kind of situation, one needs to to have sort of anger at that sort of attitude. One should not be should have anger towards that attitude.
Then doji pombo di don de ese gala pombo rangxin ji ma zhu ba. Yeah. Ani tela samjian xue de xiu se pombo rangxin ji ma zhu ba. Ani pombo choba zam la den ne ani samjian se da ge wa. Pombo choba zam la den ne samjian se da ge.
So the
tela samjian xue xue de se.
So the text continues there that that what is called a sentient being is simply designated upon the collection of the aggregates. That's what is called a sentient being.
Oh yeah. That didn't. 其他养老错了嘛？带呢新的结巴家儿，是讲了新的错把了带呢，俺的新的错把了。错怎么了？带呢？新的些大把拿心，现在就可以别的了。碰不错把了带呢，身边些大家给别了太高了。
So the example for how it is that we designate a sentient being upon the collection of the aggregates is just like the way in which we designate, we give the name chariot or cart to a collection of parts. The collection of the parts is that which is designated as a chariot.
Oh yeah, they in that cancer said the Kadiji Yoade Sana, and the Pumbo talked about Pumbo Chobala, Dashi Pumbo talked about then a tabatum to Yoade.
So the person, well, the person then is just simply designated based upon the collection. The collection of the aggregates, it's merely designated upon that basis.
Oh, so then
So apart from being designated, merely designated upon that basis, that collection of the aggregates, there's no autonomous person at all. It doesn't exist in an autonomous fashion.
Rawandu Truba, Rangun Truba said the cancer, Dashi Shella Ram Malaba Yoba. Shella Ram Malabati, Rawandu Yubi, Shella Ram Malaba Yobati, and Rawandu Yubi turning body.
So when we say something is autonomous or it's existing or established from its own side, what that means, what that indicates, is that it doesn't depend upon the basis for giving it, for designating it. The base, it's without relying upon the basis of designation, it exists in its own right, on its own.
Malaba Yobati, Rawandu Yobatan, Datu Yobaki Tenche, Shella Ram Malaba Mebati, and a dame return.
So when we say then that a person or self or any kind of internal or external thing exists as it's designated upon its basis of designation, what that means then is that the basis of designation is other than it, and that is the thing upon which the thing, the self, the person, or whatever is designated. And so if the fact that it does depend upon that basis is the meaning of it being selfless, not having a self.
인상 시제의 대화나라 다자바기 시제의 대화나라 텔란다 제자와니 현라라 말레바데 현라라 말레바데 다레스 현라라 말레바 메바데 다메바데 어데인다 현라 텔라카리와레스나 아니 체시 가사기 띵도 현라라 라 말레바 메바데라 가사기 다메다 체시 풍속의 띵도 현라라라 말레바 메바데라 아니 취지다메 전에 선거래 체시 개버시
라 양켈송은 계시라
ela daje chawanis daksan에 간디지라스 그래서 현라라 말레바 에체 현라라 말레바 데스 데다레스 데메바데 현라라 말레바 메바데 아니 다메바레스 다텔라 현라라 말레바데 가사 체시 가사다부 현라라 말레바 메바데 가사기 다메 체시 가사다부 현라 가서래 라 말레바데 다도 추바체 가사기 다체 현라라 말레바 메바데 가사기 다메 사모체 다진이 나시 다도 체시 풍속의 땐도 현라라 말레바 메바데 취다메 체시 분조 현라라 말바 여바데 취다
So the way this works then is it's explained in the commentary by the master Chandrakirti on Aryadeva's 400 verses. And in that it says that something not relying upon something else is self.
현라 라라와르와 지난게 요치 탐제 현라 되와르와 현라 되와 뭐 현라 라야 레바 인장 현라 라 말레바 요바데 다 다메바 다다도 주바제 다메바제.
So the so-called self is a quality of not depending upon something else. And selflessness, being not without a self, is the quality of depending upon something else, is depending upon something else. So if we take a person as sort of the basis for making this qualification, if we say that the person if we were to say the person did not rely upon something else, then we would say that that person is self in the sense of not relying upon something else. Similarly with the aggregates, if we take them as the basis for making this qualification, then we would say that if the aggregates or some portion of them did not rely upon something else, then they would exist as a self also, in this case being the self of phenomena. So the self of persons and the self of phenomena are distinguished in that way, in that either one is sort of some base is determined to be existing on its own, not dependent upon something else, regardless of whether it's a person or other phenomena. But then the fact that persons depend upon other things is their selflessness. And so we distinguish the selflessness of the person with taking the person as the basis for making that distinction. And then we take other phenomena other than the person, the aggregates and so forth, as the basis for making that kind of qualification or distinction. And then we say they're without any self because they rely upon other things.
현라 라 말레바 여밤 라왕와 여바테 여바 가사 라왕도 좀 라라레 말레바 좀 안에 가서를 주와이나 다 가사당 라왕도 주비 라왕도 여나 다 라왕도 주비 찍도 여와레 라왕도 주비 투마 여와레 저와 지리 여나 찍단 투마 가론도 여줄래 여고래 직단 도마 가론에 매박이 예주지 아니 지 매바 인상 아니 제가 가소래 라완도 연하양 라완도 주베 직단 도마 가론도 여고 그래 다인자 간사대 라완도 주바이나 라완도 주베 직도 주바래 간 타타대 주바래
So the person then, if the person was autonomous, existing in a way that did not depend upon other things, then it would then we have to examine how it is that it exists in that autonomous way. If there's an autonomous person that doesn't depend upon other things, then it has to exist either as identical with the rangwandu chik yang rangwandu. So it either has to be a single thing which is autonomous, or it has to be a different thing which is autonomous. It has to exist either identical with itself or apart from itself in an autonomous fashion.
So the this is explained also that the master Kamalashila explains that if something exists, it either has to exist as a single thing or as multiple things. Those are the only two alternatives. Something is either unitary or it's multiple or complex. There's no other alternative beyond that. Those have the relationship such that if one excludes something as existing in one of those ways, then it determines positively that it must exist in the other way. So it's an excluded middle in the sense of two alternatives which are comprehensive and cover all possibilities. 근데 인자다 가서래 나도 라완도 주위 가사 라완도 주나 라완 직당 가로도 주고이나 주고와 인자 다 가사대 풍보당 라완도 주위 찍으려담 타데레스 라완도 주풍 가대 풍보당이나 제단 직받전도 주를 세가나 아니 풍보대 나이나 제단 직받전도 주세 가르스월에서나 풍보대 가대 풍보당 다니오대 세대 아니 단도 다대 라왕주 다대 마체와체 다시 가사대체 다시 풍보대당 다시 가사 니오대 라왕 주병 오직이나 다 간을 거래에서나 계단 집바 니도 주루 쓰리가라 다대 계시 소소를 깨와다 집바 주대 아니 계시 소소를 깨와다 집바 주대 풍보 남나 깨와다 집부칠 쓰리가라 풍보 진직 제바 치신도 안에 다 진직 지고 그래.
So if the self was autonomous, if it if it existed as an autonomous thing, then it would have to exist either as identical with the aggregates, or it would have to exist autonomously as something which is separate from the aggregates. Those two are an exhaustive dichotomy. And so the verse here, the first verse out of this chapter in the basic text says, if the aggregates were the self, if the self were the aggregates, then it would become something that arises and is destroyed. So here it says, if the aggregates and the self were established by means of a nature which is, or if they were identical, had an identical nature which was established by means of its own intrinsic identity, then the self, that self would be destroyed and would arise and be destroyed in individual moments, just as because the aggregates arise and are destroyed in that way.
Oh yeah, then 당니 현대 대다를 믿어라. 다다 풍부니오 대 현대 양 직도 되고 말이 있어요. 랑데 양 다다 풍부네 직도 되도 메롱아래서. 이나 양 다티 컨트롤 코레서나 랑잔지 주용 원 직이나 랑잔지 주용 원 직이나 안에 타대 때문에 직이 받았다 두스도 거래.
건다 nga 직 주마송 nga dakshi dakchi drawa jumasong konda.
알았지?
nga dakshi yorwa.
다시
di jumasong nga ngodochi. Di yankyasong na. So in the previous little section, I forgot to translate a key term that the aggregates function as the basis for designating the self. And the self is the thing which is designated upon the aggregates. So with that kind of relationship existing, either the self has to be, if it's autonomous, it has to either be identical with the thing which it is designated, upon which it is designated, or it has to be separate from that thing which that base which it is designated upon. Those two kinds of relations are the only, or two ways of being are the only way that an autonomous self could exist. And so then the verse goes on to explain that if the self was identical with the aggregates, that it would have the properties of arising and disintegrating just as the aggregates undergo those arising and disintegrating.
당니 현대 대다를 믿어라. 다다 풍부니 직도 믿어라. 랑데단 대다 되도 미룬데. 나오냐바 칸라지비 시다데서 나냐바 시 타냐비다데 시거와. 나오냐바 칸라지비 시다데 풍부다 랑잔지 직도 줍나. 되니 풍부다 직도 줄라. 라와도 줍나. 아니 다 칸라에 때문에 그 직도 주고 와 연장. 아니 랑잔지 줍나. 아니 타다 때문에 그 직도 주고래. 직도 줄라. 대세 제와 현도야 매베스. 와 제와 현도야 매반 디 중화다 통마 여바 주데스. 예. 제와 현도야 매베스 제와 현도야 딜 중화다 통마 여바 주데스. 다다라 통마샤고 그래스. 와 다라 통마샤고 그래스. 풍보라 통마 주 체지 풍보라 통마 여바 주니까 체지 알아야 통마샤고 그래스. 알아야 통마샤고 그래스.
So it's also inappropriate to consider the self, to consider the self in that way, to accept the self as existing in that way. And here the commentary says that the self is not accepted as existing in that way by non-Buddhists. And it's also improper for Buddhists to accept the self as existing in that way also. Because if it was the case that the self, this self, which is the basis for the thought, I am, to arise, the self here functions as the base for the thought, I am, to arise. And if such a self was established as being identical by means of its own intrinsic identity with the aggregates, then it would become identical with the aggregates of the current life, this current life. And if that was the case, then it would be non-existent. It would not exist in other lives, previous or future lives. It would originate in this life, the self, and it would also have a beginning to its existence. It would have a first point of its existence, as was explained as is explained in the 27th chapter of this text.
풍분다이나 안에 가서를 다도마와 tö매봐 다케랑바 tö매봐 풍보다 다니고도 지기나 안에 다도 케랑바 tö매줘 그 가르도 와래서나 다 풍보당 다니고데 랑루라 오지 타데 도바 타데 바이바 랑루라 때가체 그러와 풍보다 다니고도 오 타데라 도바 타데라 오지인바 모지인바 다 풍보단 다니오데 랑전지 주비 지기나 아니 도바타데 모지라 도바타데 바염 미루마 다다 풍보니오데 지기인고 그랬어
Okay, so why is this the case? How is it that it would work like that? The self and the aggregates are conceptually distinct, but they have the same nature. They have the same nature. They're conceptually distinguished, but have the same basic sort of nature or characteristics. According to Rangdela, ngochiktan dopatade.
Ngojila dopatade.
Rangdela. So this is how the self and the aggregates are understood. The relationship between them is understood in that way within Buddhist philosophy. But if this relationship of having the same nature, but being conceptually distinct, this is necessary. This could not obtain if things
if
the self and the aggregates, if the self was understood as existing by means of its own intrinsic identity, then it would be impossible to present this understanding of the self as having the same nature as the aggregates, but being conceptually distinct from the aggregates.
무주바데 가르레서나 란전지 주나 덴바 추고래 심바 군조 와라 난조당 내수 미드바 샤초나양 덴바라 난조당 내수 미드바 샤미츠바 인장 아니 다 된다 다다 풍부니오데 덴바이나 난조당 내수 tum바샤고래 대인자 난조당 내수 tum바샤도간 tum바샤이가라 가소래 나중에 내가 tumba 샤바이 가라 다단 pom보이 우리 직샤고 그래서 란전이 주발로 와 덴바 주바 나와나 신 덴바 주바 샤고 그래서 좀바 군조가 나중에 내가 미드바 인자 샤쇼 그래 덴바 주나 샤 미드바 인자 다다 pom보이 우리 덴바 직도 샤고 그래서
So the way this works is that if the way the self exists is not established by means of its own intrinsic identity as identical with the aggregates, which is designated upon, the distinction here we have to draw here the distinction between the way the thing actually exists and the way it appears to us sort of phenomenally. According to the sort of way in which it's apprehended by ordinary beings, beings which are under the control of some confusion. They understand the self as being identical with, having intrinsically identical with the aggregates, and that kind of understanding is mistaken because in the way it appears to that kind of understanding doesn't accord with the way the self actually exists. This is hard.
군소도 뭐 군소 와라 나도 다녀서 믿음 바샤고 그래스. 덴발라 나도는 좀 바샤고 그래스.
According to the way things are, the way things really are, or I should say that something which is real has to, the way the thing appears has to accord with the way it exists. That's the sort of definition of something being real, that it's the way it appears and the way it exists are the same. But for some kind of perception, confused perception, which does not see things as they really are, for that, things don't exist the way they appear to that. So for confused sort of mind, which grasps at things in the way they appear phenomenally, it holds the self to be identical with the aggregates, whereas in reality, the self is not identical with the aggregates.
다 풍부다 지위나 아니 풍부 남자한테 풍부게 남자한테 세바레스 아니 다도 캐랑바도 되메레스 저와 내가 렘바보 다당 내가 랑자스 풍부스 니 캐랑바도 되메레 아니 풍부단다니 타대 때문에 지위나 아니 풍부 남자한테 좋아레스 풍부 면담레스
풍부이 명tamre
풍부만도 요마 다다 풍부니 저와 내가 렘바보 다스당 랑자 풍부스 전에 캐 렘바를 마도 다당 풍부니 지위나 아니 풍부 남자한테 세바레스
If the I was, the self was identical with the aggregates, then it would be, if it was completely identical, such that there was no distinction between them whatsoever, then the self would just be a name for the aggregates, and then all kinds of impossibilities would obtain, such as the thing which takes up the aggregates would be identical with that which it takes up, that the aggregates. The self which appropriates the aggregates would be identical with the aggregates that are taken up or appropriated by the self. And just as the aggregates are multiple, then the self also would have to be a multiple thing as well.
인자 잡지 막이 예와 렘바 마토위 다여 마이 제바이 차위지 예와 렌이 다이나 치기다니 메바인 세가나 예와 렘바 마인 바세가 다시 품벌레 샴바기 예와 렘바 보메나스 예와 렘바 마인 마토비 다여 마인 차위치르스 예와 렌이 다이나서 예와 렘바 렌자 품보 다이나 아니 다 다샤사면도스 풍부 다샤사면 풍부레 로스 다시요 말이
풍부레
로스 다시요 말이 풍부 고람 다샤면도
So if one holds 건다
내가 렘바 마도에도 잡지 니디말 영화와 내가 렘바 마도에 다여 많이 차비치 풍부레 현도 안에 다지면아스 내가 렘바 마이 다여 많이 차비치르스 내가 렌이 다이나 내가 렘바 렌자 풍부 다이나 다 풍부레 마도 밖에 다시 현쇼하면도 있어.
So there's another verse in the 27th chapter which explains that, which says that if the self was the aggregates, if it was identical with the aggregates, then there would be no distinction between that which is taken up by the self, that is the aggregates. The aggregates are appropriated or taken up by the self. And in that case, there would be no, if the self was identical with the aggregates, completely indistinguishable from the aggregates, then there would be no way to present the self apart from the aggregates, and that would obtain, that kind of mistake would occur.
솔직히 지적 전투세대 가르래서나 세대 나다 풍부녀어디 세대 풍부디 세대 아니 가와 세대네 풍부어디 저처만 주고 말와 세대 나대 저처만 주고 말해 이제 풍부 전지세 봐주네 다 전지 다분 풍부 다다 풍부녀어디 뭐 지기나 풍부 전지세 봐 전부 신도 다 전지 치고래 다 전지 저거에나 풍부디 세대 풍부디 풍부어디 저처만 민주와 나대 저처만 저와 인자 풍부 전지 세 봐주는 다 전지 저거에나 안에 다대 저처만 민주고
So another problem would obtain here if the self or the I was identical with the aggregates that it's designated upon. If that situation obtained, then during the course of this or at the end of this life, the aggregates are disintegrate. They cease to exist. And if it was the case that the I or the self was identical with the aggregates, then the I or the self would also disintegrate and would cease to exist at the end of this life. It's the I or self which takes rebirth into another lifetime. So if it was identical with the aggregates, then it would itself disintegrate, cease to exist, and would not be in a position to take rebirth in the following life.
manju nga asana ta nga de ngaranji nga asana ani jewa chima jewa nga mane dium dine chima drobe nga chikdang ani chedi chapadu chewe nga chik yi ban yowa inzang chedi chapadu chewe nga de ani kasore jewa chima drogo amare.
We have to make a distinction here, because we have there's sort of the I in the sense of I which came from a previous life and is now in this current life and then will go into the next life, that sense of I. But within the present life, we qualify, we sort of make a distinction upon that I, such that we restrict it to the current life, and we think, so there's a sense of I which pertains specifically to the present life, where we consider it in relationship just to this lifetime. So there's two senses of I that have to be distinguished there. So it's explained up above in the 27th chapter, or previously in the 27th chapter of this text as well, that there's the notion of I, or the sense of I, which is specific to a particular lifetime, such as there's a sense of the I in the form of a divine being like a god. There's the sense of I, which is specific to the humans and other animals and such, so in the different realms of existence. And then the sense of I as the that which goes from one life to the next, which basically pervades all of the different lifetimes that a person obtains. So that second sense of I is broader, whereas the sense of I, which is specific or limited to a particular lifetime, is narrower.
Oh yeah, then it想个就说说了，经济说说钱呐，谁的叫钱把没得比他还当过的，是吧？个就说说了，经济说说钱呐，是但打让人家的个就说说人了，经济说说钱给人呐，打碰碰你经济说说钱给人呐，他经济钱话的，个就俺去牛的，个就俺嘛他起码牛的，让人去注意个说说了人呐。다 란전지주 소소와 줄라 진지 소소钱나 소소 진지 제에 대한 란전지주 소소와 줄라 대단하 그 증아마다 치만 이오텔라 아니 제가 매봐 제메 텐션인 거래스 그러와 제가 매봐 란전지주 소소와라 아니 제메 텐션인 거래스 란전지주 소소와라 제가 테크 말해 제메 텐션 연구래 제메 텐션 인상 그지 아마기 안에 채와지 그지 치마기 태지 안에 가서래 채와 잼미주미두바 그지 잼미두바 채와
So another problem would arise if there was this kind of identity of self in the aggregates. It says in the text, moreover, if the self arose and disintegrated in each particular moment. In each individual moment, and if it was established by means of its own intrinsic identity in each particular moment, each state of it in each moment was established by means of intrinsic identity, then it would be impossible for the moments to have the moments of the I or self to have relationships with each other, such that the action of that the I or self created in a prior moment would be unrelated to the actions of the self or I in the subsequent moment. And then it would be impossible for things like memory to occur.
배좀된데 배자고래. 정말 좀 되는 거. 겨우 알아니라. 겨우 안에 가서 니 겨발련서 서 안에 시에자와데 참바 안에 텐투고 말해서 미담바 가르에서나 참바 민주대 마당 폼보니오데 아니 가서 타대 때문에 그 지금 인디 잠바 류가도 잠바 다들 가르와 나가르와 류가데 나이 가도 간바 아니 나티티 저와데 잡아 주고 말해
So if that was the case, that the moments of the self or the I existed completely distinct by means of their own intrinsic identity, if they were individuated by means of some intrinsic identity, then it would be impossible for memory to occur. For example, where the Bhagavan Buddha recalled and it said, in that life, I was King Mandata. This is referring to a statement that the Buddha made, where he recalled a former life that he had been born as a king, and if the I and the self, the I or the self was existing in one period, was intrinsically established in that period with that identity, and was completely separate, totally distinct from the way it existed in a subsequent period, then that kind of statement would be impossible. It would be impossible to have that kind of memory. And the reason for this is that just as the body of that period disintegrated, the self of that time would have disintegrated as well, would have ceased to exist. And therefore, there would be no connection between the self, the present self, and the former or past self.
Oh yeah, 开心当最近有的具体的吧，因为开心个结网啊嘛，最近个产品都啊拿新钱的，是吧？但真的，当我今有天让咱去准备说话伊那，俺你具体这么天这个具体的吧，英国的太爷呢，俺你俺嘛个吃话看吃话的，俺你这话打起嘛这个产图嘛的是。
So if the way it works is that people of different continuums, for example, there's someone Yajnadatta and Devadatta, two separate people. These are names given to two separate people. They're not able to recall the events or the actions that the other person performed. They can't have memories of the other person's activities or experiences. So they're distinct. And if the self or the I was intrinsically distinct from by means of its own intrinsic identity, distinct from the aggregates, then it would be impossible for a person to have recollection of the actions that they performed and the experiences that they had in the past.
다시 풍부대 다 임바지나 사대때문에 다 다다 풍부님부 지금 임바대이나 안는 다대 풍부대라 나여바 티신도 안는 다텔라양 안는 나여가 다지 임바 티신도 풍부가 어디야 지 임바기 괜히 온 거라 가대 풍부 다나 대제지 마웬 다대 다자 망부 주세가라 풍부라 나여바 티신도 안는 다장 민자와 나여거와 다 지기인바 신도 안에 풍부가 어디야 지기인바 풍부다 다니 타대 때문에 지기나 견디와리 직체.
So another problem of another fault would arise if the self was identical with the aggregates. If the self is identical with the aggregates, because the aggregates there are 5 of them, then the self would become 5 things as well. Or the alternative would be that if the self was identical with the aggregates, then the aggregates would be a single thing. They would have to have the same number.
This one. Oh yeah. Da mambo chua dang, xian da mambo yoba da da jang mambo chua. Da ji yinba dan pongpong o da ji du chua jian tu dan guo de. Da teni ta jing de yuan de de ngai de ngai le xu xia. Da pongping nang zha zam du sai bai. Da 再有开朗把推门是打当碰不你我自己呢打碰不俺那碰比那个碰不嘛对吧妈的俺那叫我连把我打当连接碰不是真的小有啊妈的打的俺那碰比那个怎么三百俺那打再有开朗把就推门把的
So the commentary here explains that, moreover, if the self was identical with the aggregates, that the aggregates, just as the aggregates are multiple, there are many of them, the self would be become multiple. There would be many of them. And since the self would be simply have the same number as the aggregates, so since the self would be the same, basically would have the same definition as the aggregates, it would be a synonym of the aggregates, then it would be pointless to hold the position that the self is substantially existent.
Oh yeah, that didn't. Niwa lanja da lemba bo niwo de, ane cheba bodang cheba ni jidu jiwa ko jin, uma jubi gaso cheba le dang chawa jime ba teni jidi zimba rima yin si, le cheba bodang chawa niwo de jidu ma juba zaba. 我在想那些人，你话浪家的两百步，你话浪家的，你话碰不答应那你话浪家的两百步就过来是，碰不答应那你话浪家的两百步就把印章，你700步当7万你抓也没多是，是吧？来当700步就会这样过来是。
So this, as mentioned already, alluded to earlier, another problem would occur. Another fault would arise in holding the self as identical with the aggregates. Here it says that the thing which is taken up, the thing which is appropriated, would become that which takes it up. That is, the thing which is taken up being or appropriated is the aggregates, and the self or the I is the thing which takes them up, which appropriates them. And since they would become identical, the self would be identical with the thing which it appropriates, and or equally the thing which is appropriated, the aggregates, would be identical with the self, would be the self. And if that was the case, then agent and action agent and object of action would be the same, would be identical. Something that is performing an activity would become identical with the object which it is performing the activity upon, and that sort of incoherence would occur.
Oh yeah, that day, Pumbo Dayin, but Dada Pumbo Nijina, or that journey, Kontosha the journey Mata, Jensum Situati Mata. Oh, Damambo Tavata, Dadu Mawatendu with the Java Chamber Mideba to start into Tangori. That is Jela, that's Dada Pumbo Niwo de Ranzaji with Tada in Bache. That Ranzaji Tada in a journey. Kade Pumbo now, like Pumbo Chani Maba Churu.
So the last line of the commentary then says, thus, by means of these reasonings, one should understand that one should give rise to a very firm, stable and firm ascertainment that the self and the aggregates, those two things, are not established by means of their own nature or own essence as being single or identical. One should develop that. So these are the reasonings were given above, that the self and if the self and the aggregates were identical, that they would the self would become something which arises and disintegrates. That the self would become a multiple thing, a multiplicity of things, that it would become identical with the thing that it, as agent, operates upon by taking up the aggregates and so forth. All of those faults and would arise. And then we've gotten now to the second section of this verse, where it says that if the self was other than the aggregates, then it would become devoid of the characteristics of the aggregates. It would not have the properties, it would not have the characteristics of the aggregates.
So 가된 다다 폼보 남나 라누라 다다 폼보니 가서래 뭐 직체 뭐 시험 많이 받체 뭐 타대 많이 받체 다다 폼보니 뭐 직인 받체 다다 폼보니 타대인 받체 라누 들으러 봐 나보다 보니 타대 뭐 타대 많이 봐 도시체 다 가대 나 폼보네 란전지 주비 현도 좀나 세르타 란전지 주비 현도데 타대도 좀나 다다 폼보니 오도 뭐 타대인 거 그래.
So in our system, our system, then we say that the self and the aggregates have the same nature. They're of the same nature. That they're not intrinsically different, or they're not. They don't have a different nature. But we say even though they have the same nature, they are different. They're not identical. So it says, then the commentary here says that if the self was established as something other than the aggregates by means of its own intrinsic identity,
나한테 폼보 뒤제주 준비 아니 천이 깨와도 집어다 내와라 소와기 아니 내가 매바데 대다다 차월 주대 차월 주대 다데 파랑게 천이다 매단 바이 당 다파랑게 천이다 매단 바이자 파랑게 천이다 차월와 그래갖고 다다 파랑하시래 다방이 오데 란전지 주비 시행이장 다라 파랑게 천이다 매단 파랑라 따이 천이다 매단 바 대나신지 나대가 본부 뒤에 수비 진지다 매단 바시고 고래.
So the commentary here says that if that was the case, if the self was established as having an identity, which is intrinsic identity, which is other than that of the aggregates that it's designated upon, then that self would be devoid of the characteristics of things which are constructed or compounded or constructed, such as arising and abiding and disintegration and so forth. Those characteristics. It would be devoid of that, and it would be like something which has like two things which have completely distinct characteristics. Like a horse and a bull. Horses and bulls have different characteristics, different properties, and are distinct in that way. If the self was established as something apart from the aggregates by means of its own intrinsic identity, it would exist in that way.
대단하 폼보 뒤제주 준비 다데 매버 주그래 뒤제공으로 주 다데 매고 중그래 매 다도 매버 주데 뒤마체 힘비치 뒤제가 천이답니다. 빼나 냥대다 난게 매도 나시래.
If that was the case, then if the self didn't have the characteristics that indicate that something is a construct, a constructed phenomenon, then the self would be non-existent. It would be because it would be a non-construct, a non-constructed phenomenon. It would be like nirvana or like a flower in space, a flower that arises in space.
뭐야, 근데 다 누마 제이나, 나 누마 제이나, 아니 완전 현재지, 미남이지는 미봐야 미르대, 완전 현재에서는 완전에서는 안가랑 그 전이 주와 준비들랑 완전 현재에서 토마 매반에 아니 가서래 군전당 주벨레바다 말레바다 마되바 토마 매가랑 알아서 줄랑앙 슈슈시 지기와 인상 된다면 완전 현재 시과래 된다면 완전 현재지 미남이지 나네 미바데 다 가르에서나 나점데 왜 나점데 완전 현재 미바 미래데 아니 두마체 임비시 두마체라 만들는지 미바텔라 다 간사인 거고 봐 어디 있습니다.
So likewise, we have within us a natural or sort of innate grasping at I. This innate grasping at I is something that doesn't arise out of the study of philosophy or some kind of process of intellectual investigation or something like that. Rather, it just kind of spontaneously arises automatically within us, from beginningless time. There's no beginning to the time in which we've had this sense of I that is innate or within us. And that innate grasping at an I has an object and then a sort of aspect, a way in which it grasps that object. The object here is the self, and within those two, if the I or the self was not a constructed phenomenon, then it would be improper for it to function as the object of that innate grasping at I. It wouldn't operate as the object, because the mikpati gangsa mikpati ngatsin linki mikpa. So the object of this grasping at innate grasping at I is the I itself, and if it was a non-constructed phenomenon, it would not be appropriate. It would not work as the object of that innate grasping at I. If the I was a non-constructed phenomenon, meaning something not arising from causes and conditions, it could not operate as the observed object of that innate grasping at I.
양 가디 풍부 남래 시 풍부 천이 매바 주루세 대당 찍라 양나 풍부의 천이 다 수지 풍부 천이 수수롱와 초대 천이 냠수녀와 두시의 천이 참아증바 두시의 아니 용어바 두체바 남시의 천이 유라 소소나바르바 래 아니 가상 오니 현도 주바 주라 와 가상 오니지 현도 주바 주라 가상 오니지 현 풍부하래 오니 현도 주바 준 대단하 수레 셈 현도 증바 나싱시 수당 셈니고 현도 주바데 아니 수당 셈니고들에 못하도 증바 나싱 다 풍부랑 못하다바 소소 통으로 주나 다 풍부랑 못하다바 통거 말에 대바 증바요 다 풍부당 오치래.
So another problem, or another aspect of this problem that would arise if the self was other than the aggregates, had a nature which was completely distinct from the aggregates, would be that it would not have the properties of the aggregates. Other properties of the aggregates, such as here in the commentary, it's listed that there are 5 characteristics, or the characteristics of the 5 aggregates are the first one being that functioning as something which is physical, being suitable to be a physical or object. The second one being experience, experiencing things. And the third being taking up or describing the signs of things. The fourth being that forming things, formations. And then the fifth being providing information about objects. Those properties or characteristics are the sort of defining characteristics of the 5 aggregates. And if the self was established as something that was other by means of its own essence from that, then it would be similar to the way in which we hold mind to be other than physical, that which is physical. The body and so forth is other than the mind. One would hold those the self and the aggregates in a similar way, that as if it was the distinction that's made between the physical and mind. And if they had a completely separate nature that was apart, one was apart from the other in that way, if they were seen in that way, then it would be incorrect, because we don't perceive the self in that way. We don't hold it to exist in that way.
Oh yeah, that is it. That Kadi Shendi, that Pumbola, Shendu Mawala, Dinage Mayino, Shenase, that Shendi Devati, Casa Pumbo, the Tenim Midimba, Ranja, which I had to Simpatugora, Pumbo, that Tenim Midimba, Tampung, what Tadapatugora. In that Kandi, Shendi, Pumbola, Shendu Mawala, then the Ligi, Kadi Pumbonam, like a Tani Pumbi Tenim about to show, Nage Mare, Senam. 대다게 제현도 만매장 현대 대다게 다다 풍보니 안에 란자투비 제현도 만매장 치더마와데 로 현지지 미네마 말레스 코랑고 지지 로 현지되기 아니 다다 풍보니 아니 가소래 란자투비 제여도 란자투비 제 tenshendo wa ngo tada bara min dada phombo niyo de ngo tada bara mine ani ma mare se lo hanji chi de ma imba kare se lo hanji ki hanji la an dada phombo ngo tada se ba mare lo hanji la
So here then there's someone might raise the objection by saying that this, which has been discussed above, does all of this, these reasonings that have been given above, don't function to refute the statements of other philosophers, non-Buddhist philosophers, who hold that the self is a different substance from the aggregates. In this kind of position, of the non-Buddhist philosophers, it's held that the self exists as a self-sufficient substance, which is separate from, completely distinct from the aggregates. One might say that the reasonings above don't affect that claim. They don't negate or refute that sort of assertion that the self is a substance which is separate, a distinct self-sufficient substance which is other than the aggregates. The reply to that is that although those philosophers say that the self is a different substance from the aggregates, self-sufficient substance apart from the aggregates, that those statements are not made due to observing it with some kind of innate cognition or natural cognition. Here referring to the way we observe the self ordinarily with our innate cognition is we always see the self or the I in relationship to the aggregates. We don't see it apart from the aggregates.
요데 가서 대다게 제셔도 만매장 치다를 마와 따를 로 현재지 미네 마와 말에서 워낙 가르래서나 지시에서나 때는 답이 전대 대다기 아니 지난 그 오남 때나 때위 되 마도바 다다 풍보 때나 답이 되 마도바 다 민도 따와 점도 다다 풍보 때데 민게 따와 점도 마와라 아니 장네 민게 따와 점도 되 미니 봐 mingi tawa zavina lende la soba ki namsha la joba la ani namsha mita ba ki ani jita jene rwa mingi tawa zadu mawa la zhang ne kunzu denpa le nyamde kunzu denpa la namsha toba da zamdu le da namsha ki chawa chini si jo mingi ba yinza ani kunzu denpa le nyamde tenzi Tanang Lune se ta tenzi Tanang Lu Karasan Tata Pumbo Ranshi Truasi Tenzi Tanang Lune Pumbo la Zeshen Bitaki Tsani Dojin Animao Da Pumbo la Zetan Raja to say the Truat Mare Sungumbare.
So then what's the answer to this question here that if how is this so? If you ask that, or how is it that these other philosophers advocate that kind of position that the self exists as a substance, self-sufficient substance, separate from the aggregates? Well, those people have they don't understand the meaning of things being designated independence. They don't understand how that works, that things are merely designated dependently. And when they hear someone say that that the self is merely designated as a name, it's merely designated or labeled upon the aggregates as a name, they hear that and they become terrified and are frightened of that kind of statement. And then they even fall away from, or they lose even a conventional or phenomenal understanding of phenomenal reality, in which things arise in dependence upon their causes and conditions merely as they're designated on the basis of designation. Losing that sort of understanding of phenomenal truth or reality, they become deceived by fallacious, specious kinds of reasoning. This referring to a specious reasoning which attempts to establish the self as a self-sufficient substance apart from the aggregates. And then they imagine the characteristics of a self that would exist as a substance apart from the aggregates, and they advocate that kind of self.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Dini ledan cheba bo taba la so wa tarabji cheba bo taba garabji kausu ane dadan nyewa lemba ni dadan ane nyewa lemba phumbo ni penzi tene chuba da phumbo la dewa da phumbo da la dewa chuba yimba sumbe nas ane shende teda ki dawin da phumbo la ngo tada begi ane da kunzo tuyang kako.
So this has been explained also in the examination of agents and the objects of action, which has been in that chapter, which examines those agents and the objects of action, where it's explained that the self and the thing the things which the self appropriates, meaning here the aggregates, are mutually dependent. They depend upon each other, the self and the aggregates, which are taken up by the self, agent and object of action. So they're established as with that mutual dependence, and in that explanation there, the kind of self which the non-Buddhist philosophers imagine to exist as a substance apart from the aggregates, completely distinct from the aggregates, is rejected even conventionally or phenomenally.
Oh yeah, da rang ngoy chumna da phumbo ni rang chu rang chenyi ju ngo ji dan ta de ka ru de chu ge wa tang ji du chu ba开连呢，空都写给那些太大猪八汤，是吧？太大的猪那样，空都写给那些太大猪呗。然后嘞， 다들 가루도 주거와다 니가 라야 리베 내가 통하나 다 직단 도마 가루도 라자지 주고 직단 도마 가루도 주발라 리베 내가 통하나 다다데 간저 와래서 다네 랑고 오요 주바 중세자 매도 냥도 녀와 예반니 직단 현지 진안증기 유랑신 매바 도베 다와 예바 인수사
That's
두스리다
this.
대단 다 랑경 오요 춤나 다다 본본이 오데 랑경 오요 집에 직당 도마카도 주고 그래서 다다 본본이 직당 도마카도 주고 그래서 뭐지도 주발라 공도 셰바 그 리벤네 바파 타데도 주발라 공도 셰바 그 리벤네 바파와이다 니가라 리벤네 바 통하나스 다다데 간데로 와라서나 라시지 주비 직당 도마 가run도 마주베 직당 도마 가run도 마주나 라시지 주비 안에 라시지 마주고 그래 다네 랑경 오요 주바 중세장 매도 냠도 녀와 예바니 아니 직달 현재 정한
So the conclusion of this section then is that if one has examined, once one is established that, thus it's necessary to establish the self such that, and to understand that if the self was established by means of its own essence or its own intrinsic nature, then it would have to be established as either identical or separate from the aggregates. The self and the aggregates, those two things, would have to be established as either identical or separate by means of their own intrinsic identity. One of those two kinds of modes of existence would have to be established for this relationship between the self and the aggregates. Either they would have the same nature by means of their own intrinsic identity, or they would have to have distinct natures which were established by means of their own intrinsic identity. And then when one sees that both of those kinds of positions are negated by reasoning, once one sees that properly, then one comes to have the understanding, the ascertainment that the self is not established by means of its own nature in any way whatsoever, not even to the slightest degree. And one gets that kind of, obtains that kind of ascertainment. And obtaining that kind of certainty, definitive ascertainment of that the self does not have any kind of nature which is established on its own at all, then no. Nyepani chikta lenkiki.
직달 현재지 만지 유 직달 현재 만지 세가나 나랑 신지 좋아지 전발 현재 되기 유 아니 나랑 신지 좋아지 전당 유로 바테 매방에 와레스 또 와레스
나좀 유 랑치 매퍼토바 토피타와
타와 매바 또 베타와냐 바레 나랑 신이 또 베타와냐 바레 단다 디레
nga zimbe yu nga
nganzen henji se de chati che ji yu de nga rang xi ji chuwa zhen dang yu te me ba do wa yin zang te me ba de dang me da wa yin ba.
So then when one obtains that kind of certain ascertainment, then one has obtained the view which realizes that the object which is grasped as the I by the innate view towards the perishable collection of the aggregates, the innate notion of the perishable aggregates as being real, that kind of one understands that it is without essence, that it's devoid of essence.
간대지를 시작을 해서나 다시 품비등도 요하래 해서나 다시 품비 되나요 말이. 다시 품비 띵도 따바점도 주발에 쓰거라. 따바점도 다시 품비 되나매. 다시 품비 띵도 따바점도 예배 다시 품비 띵도 예바 샤거야 말이. 다시 품비 띵도 연나 다시 품비 띵도 짜냐 안예고 말래. 다시 품비 띵도 짜나 안예기 말이. 니자 다시 품비 띵도 따바점도 예.
다시 풍부 띵도
다시 품비 띵도 안매. 다시 품비 띵도 따바점도 예.
양키할 수는
생각에 거요 생활한 정anga 살아대 말한테 다시 품비 띵도 요아래서나 다 템메스고 아래라. 연나 다시 품비 띵도 짜는 여거 와래. 풍봉아 초밤 야자 강양 응강아 미니 바체. 라 따따바점도 요새에 가나 따바점도 요새에 가나 다시 풍보 채시 중에 따따바점도 가시하고래.
So then you say, what is the relationship between the I and the aggregates here? Here we say that the I is designated based upon the aggregates. So the aggregates here are the basis of this designation, of applying this name. But we say, then we ask the question, is the I, is it within the aggregates, within the basis of designation? And is it findable within this basis of designation? And we say no, it's designated upon the basis of designation, but it does not exist within the basis of the designation. When you take here the basis of designation is the, you could say the collection of the aggregates or some portion of the aggregates, some portion of that collection. And the I is not that name is designated upon those the collection of the aggregates or some part of the aggregates, but it's not found within that collection, that basis of designation.
예비 생活밀람 요스 안 규매랑 규매 레비 다단 랑보소스 가서래 나와 잠 가라 나잠 마도 tenji 들루시 tenji 시들이 안에 따바자마도 매서 간배나 가르래서는 뉴지 생활 밀람 요스 가라 니기 세밤 니기 내가라 아니 밀람게 유 리라와 칸김 저와 니기 비숑오 리라와 칸김다 규메라베 따단 람보소 세레 규마기 나제지 람비 안에 따단 람보라 소와테다 시와 추비 나와서 마도 아니 가서 리라와 칸김당 아니 가서래 대신 가서 땅아산이 반나와라 와 그 니네가디 니지 내가라 나와 잠디당 아니 마제지 레비 아니 가서래 세와테게 나잠마도 라와네 콘도 가서래 제 나잠마도 리라와당 땅아산이 반나와라 리당라와 리당 라와
So there's a statement which expresses this, the meaning of this here. So His Holiness the Kelsang Gyatso has said that, and there's a statement where he said that just like in a dream, when one's sleeping in a dream, one has visions of mountains or fences, houses, and such, or similar to the way in which like some sort of basis of a magical illusion is when it's been affected by a spell or some kind of special substance is able to give rise to an illusion, a magical illusion. So the thing which appears in that dream, the house or the mountain or the fence or whatever, and likewise the illusory horse and bull, different kinds of appearances of illusory things which arise in the context of illusions, just as those exist.
그래서 뉴진이 시용을 밀람유 아니 김엘라베 따당 랑보소 가서 나자 마도 시디 텐지체 가야멜라 로이 나와잠 세오다 나자 마도 시텔라 메롱게 나가서 리라와당 칸김라서 와당 주마기 아니 따당 랑보소 사와네 로이 나와잠마도 시디 두미따당 리라와 칸김라서 와자마네 요 말이
So just like that, in that state or situation, in the dream or in seeing a magical illusion, the fence and the mountain, all of these things that appear, or in the illusion, the appearance of the horse that's magically created, the bull or whatever, all of these things are non-existent. They're merely a mental appearance. They're merely appearing to the mind, but they, as actual things, they're completely non-existent.
오다 대별아 아샤니 대신 최근 가서 대신 다신 대신 다신 대신도 다다신 코와다 냥데 那所谓秋根民党乐他年纪大把咱马都西的屯军我呢，主要就早晚来往马的，是他的别当时间，民党乐怕大把咱马都提醒秋根是提醒宽带，提醒我的这个提醒宽带是夸大娘啊来带哇。 大当县是吧？大当县了，属于秋跟民党他年纪往给怕大把咱了马都西的屯军我呢主要干要马的，是他今天去把几讲。
So just like that example, then he says that all phenomena, all the phenomena of samsara. Nirvana, everything that exists is in the same way, is merely existing as it's designated by cognition, by language and convention. It's the cognitions of Mingdang, Mingdang Tanyaki.
Mingdang Tanyaki 왕게 따바자 마이 마도발라 시디 튼중원에 주바제 자원에 왕마리.
So from the other than being established as they are designated by the force of language and thought, the conventions of language and thought, then from the side of the base which is being designated, they're not established in any way whatsoever.
그래서 오야, 다 대신 가서 가야 매시. 이 가서 최근 민당 타냐게 따봤잖아 마도 시대 아니 다시 원에 주바지 아니 장유와 말했어. 봐. 민당 로 타냐게 따봤자 마도
So similarly, for all these phenomena are not established from the side of the things that are designated, the bases of the designation. Rather, they're only designated by the force of the cognitions and by the force of the designation, the linguistic, the names that we use for things, by the ideas or thoughts that we have about things. They're solely designated by the power of those things.
다 전다조데 세송고하래 가르래서나 가서래 르 나와 잠마도 아니 텐지 늘루 중간에 주바 자원에 매봐 르 나와 잠마도 텐지 늘루 있거나 규미 달란도 나와다 밀람게 나와 니오데 로라 나잠당 나와 잠나신 최군 안에 가서 로라 나잠제 마도 아니 텐지 중간에 주바지와 말이었어.
So we say, just like in the way things appear in dreams or as magical illusions, things don't exist as they're appearing to be real, but so they're not existing within the basis of designation. They're not existing in some kind of objectively established mode of existence of the thing, but rather they're existing merely as a sort of appearance, mental appearance to the mind, and existing as they are designated through the force of language and thought.
가서래 규미 대신 달란도 나와 대당 어리라와 강진라서와 미랑기 나와 대당 아니 나랑 가사라서 나와 니오데 나와 로이 나와 잠미바 지바래 로이 나와 잠미바라 나랑 가사도 나와다도 나랑 가사지 타녀도 좋도바 규미 대신 달란도 나왔다 나와 잠도 규미 대신 달란도 좀 믿어봐.
So however, we have to make the distinction here in that when a stick or stone that is sort of like stick, which is given some kind of special substance placed upon it, and then a formula is recited over it, that thing appears as the horse or the bull. There's no bull or horse there whatsoever. It doesn't exist in any way whatsoever. On the other hand, the self or the I, which are designated upon the basis of designation, those things do exist conventionally, phenomenally. It is the case that the self and the I do exist conventionally or phenomenally, whereas the illusion or the mountains and fences and such that appear in dreams, those things don't exist even conventionally or phenomenally.
어디 차바 가지 저거래서나 다시 풍비된도 아니 가세 마세 따와당 그봐 왔다다도 잠바 다시 풍보라 때는 가세데 낭점데 땅아샤고에 낭점데 마도 매아 낭점들랑 아디 샤고 타녀도 좋고 아디 타녀도 가르래서나 고 다시 참아인 봐 다시 참아인 봐 낭점도 아시 아니 지된지 타녀라 차봐 낭점 되게 타녀도 자와체당 때 쳐봐라 참아신지 내봐 매봐 된담 자유이전 참아 내봐 매봐 인장 다 나세 로이 낭점라 세 가사 타녀바디 요토거래 어거서
So it's equally the case that the I is a mere appearance. It's simply appearing to the mind. The I is a mere appearance. That is the case, similar to the way that the illusion or the dream objects are mere appearances. However, unlike the objects that are seen in a dream or the magical illusions, the eye is able to perform functions, and even though it is just a mere appearance to the mind, it's able to function and is able to be established through valid forms of cognition as having a relationship to the basis of designation. The dakshila.
다시 참아 임바 아체. 아니 낭잠데라 나 줘봐라. 나 낭잠디 나의 차와 쳐봐라. 타녀비 참아 줘봐. 대라 된담제비 참아 넣어봐봐.
So the basis of designation in that case is established through valid cognition as the basis for the designation of the I or the self or the I. So that's established through valid cognition. The I itself is able to function in a valid way to perform conventional activities and such. And that being established through valid cognition, conventional valid cognition, is not vitiated or contradicted by any kind of investigation that looks at the ultimate nature of these things.
타녀도 여봐 저들 가나 직대 아니 가서 직대 차대 저거 엄마와 인상 직대 비 타녀라 차봐 아니 타녀 비 참아 현지 민해봐 아니 전단 자비 참아야 민해봐 다 된지고 하래 와 낭잠대 아니 차와 쳐봐라 어딘다 다 다시 참아 임봐 타녀 비 참아 만해봐 전단 자비 참아 민해봐 나 주민 나와 밀람 그 나와 낭잠 되게 아니 랑보고 차와 쳐봐라 지대나 맞춰봐 타녀 비 참아 넣어봐 전단 자비 참아 넣어봐 다 됩니다 다 단도 샤쇼라
So to sort of explain how this operates then, the mere appearance of the I, that I which is a mere appearance to the mind, it is established validly through, it's commonly understood by people in the world that the I exists as it's established upon established upon the basis of designation, meaning here the five aggregates or the aggregates that make up the person. So that basis is validly established. The establishment of the I upon that as a designation for that is validly established. And then there's no generally worldly understanding of the relationship and how they exist, which can be commonly recognized in the world, is not contradicted by any kind of investigation of the rational investigation of how the ultimate exists. On the opposite applies, or the opposite is the case with the appearances that we have in dreams or the appearances that we see in magical illusions. Those things are not established as being valid. They're not within the world. People understand that dreams and illusions are not real. That they're not. They don't exist the way they appear. Similarly, with valid reasoning, one can establish that the illusion or the dream appearance is not real. And then likewise, one can contradict this if one investigates it from the point of view of the reasoning which investigates the ultimate nature of things. It would also contradict the reality of the illusion or the dream. Stop there.